let's talk about my January notable reads. And I don't think I've pulled out all the books. I should probably go do that. I'll be right back. Oh, God. I almost missed my chair. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Alyssa. I am here to talk about my notable reads from January, like I said. I did this breakdown sort of wrap-up thing last month for my December reads, and you guys seem to like it, and I kind of like it because I do read a lot of books, and it's kind of hard for me to go through them all with any sort of depth, and I don't think everything deserves my attention here online. So this is really just the 6 books that I've read every month that deserve my attention to tell you about, whether they were awful or they were great. Mostly it's about great books because those are the things that really stick out in my mind, and I'm here to talk to you guys about it, and that's really it. So it sort of cuts down on some of the workload and makes it a little easier and more digestible for you guys to go through these wrap-ups, because when you read a lot of books in the month, it can get really overwhelming. Sorry, I have so much dog hair on me. It can get really overwhelming to go through over nearly 20 books every month. So this month I read 18 books, and that included 2 just strictly audiobooks, and I did DNF 1 book, which is obviously not part of this count. I'll tell you what book I did DNF just in case you're curious, and it's called the Dud Avocado, and it was just, I don't know, I couldn't get behind the narrator. She was really annoying to me, and it's by Elaine Dundee. I think it's from like the 50s or early 60s. And I just found the main character very vapid. Not my thing, not my jam. Didn't finish it, just moving on. In 2022, I don't have time for books that just don't interest me. So I also have a tiny bit of wine to celebrate because I can really only have this today because I have some work commitments starting very late tonight / tomorrow. So it's early in the day. This is my little celebratory. We read 18 books in January. That's a general summary of the month. And let's talk about the books I did read and the books that I did. So we'll start off with Mediocre by Ijeoma Eluo. I hope I'm getting better at saying her name. You would think I would because I've heard her say her name a million times, but it's taking me some time. I literally have just finished watching Jess Owens's discussion on this book. This was her book community reads pick for January. I have Mediocre on the brain. This was a fantastic, fantastic book about the dangerous legacy of white male America. And it talks a lot, there's a lot of hard truths. She goes really far back into history. I mean, the first chapter starts with how the West was won. She pulls no punches, which of course, I don't expect her to pull any punches. She is a hard-hitting, fact-driven nonfiction writer. She casts a very critical eye on America and how America works or doesn't work, as the case may be. And I mean, I thought it was really, really interesting. I will show you. I don't know what Hemi's exactly barking out. He's probably just mad at me. So I'll just take you through the chapters that she discusses so you guys can get an idea of the things that she's going to cover in this book. So it's Cowboys and Patriots, how the West was won. Very eye-opening. I did not realize that, so the narrative that I've always sort of heard, especially through the sort of pop culture Western kind of narrative, is that the Native Americans were the scalpers, but we were the scalpers, and that was a little eye-opening. It was very eye-opening. I'm like, we were awful. The whole Buffalo Bill story. Anyway, so that was a very interesting chapter for your benefit in our image, centering the white man in social justice movements. This was fascinating, especially when they talk about Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Bros, the Ivy League and the tax eaters, white man's assault on higher education. I think a lot of us can agree on the sort of criminality of our tuition, the amount of our tuition for higher education in this country. So, I mean, that whole chapter was, we have far too many Negroes, white America's bitter dependence on people of color. This talks a lot about the Great Migration and that tension, that might be the right word, between white workers and black workers. And during the Great Migration, a lot of southern states would be putting things in place to make it more difficult for black people to migrate north and take these other jobs because they were losing people to do the jobs down south. And of course, the white people didn't want to do those jobs. What do you really want? she says everything a lot more eloquently. We also have a chapter on women, which is the convenient use and abuse of women in the workplace. That was anger inducing. You have socialists and quota queens when women of color challenge the political status quo. Fascinating. I did not know about the first Black person to run for president. It was this woman whose name is escaping me right now. Let me find her name because she deserves to be named. So Shirley Chisholm was the first Black person to run for president, and we don't really talk about her, which is why I took the time to pull her name out here, because she deserves to have her name said. I guess I think the book says something about how there's like only really one biography about her, but she did run in 1972. I think the last chapter here is on football and the fear of Black men, and that chapter is really fascinating. And Teddy Roosevelt's role in football. And the fact that the author has been doxxed so much and has been under threat so much was absolutely like just appalling to read about. People are absolutely terrible. I highly recommend this if you want to learn more about all the ways in which our history in this country really came about. If you want to learn from maybe a different perspective, if you want to get yourself angry. It definitely will make you angry a lot. So good. Read that. Loved it. And then the other, switching gears a little bit on nonfiction, the other book that I really loved was Sex Cult Nun. This book, I seriously like can't stop thinking about. So this is Faith Jones. It's her memoir, and she was a child, and her parents were in. Actually, I think her father was the son of the guy who created Children of God, which is this crazy religious cult where like they used the women. So it's like evangelical Christianity,
but like make it sexy.
So they would encourage the women to be very sexual and to use their sexuality to entice people to either give money to the church or to join the church. It was very, obviously it was a cult, so it's very brainwashy and manipulative and just very upsetting in many ways. There was a lot of stuff about SA and in particular against children. They had a lot of very, very, very weird ideas about sex. It's like the guy who started whatever the Quiverful thing is with the Duggars, that guy, it's like almost exactly like their tenets about like the man being the hierarchy under God and under this and under that, and that women are at the bottom. But instead of it being sexually repressed and being it so like your woman's body is only made for their husband and they must never say no and just have all the babies, women are supposed to be sexual creatures in the Children of God, and they're supposed to have sex with all these people, and it's okay if everybody gets pregnant and it's fine, and like it's like the other extreme of religiosity. And it was just fascinating. Like a train wreck is fascinating reading this. And she is now a lawyer at Skadden and Arps. And it's kind of crazy. Good job, Faith Jones, for getting out of there. But I have like a lot of questions about how much trauma she's still trying to unpack here. And one of the things that really bothered me, I think, about this book, though, there is a lot of fat phobia in this book. And she has a lot of fat phobia. Because I'm not always the best. Like, I get distracted by, like, the razzle-dazzle of, the looking for Jesus. And I sometimes miss some of the other stuff. I couldn't miss it. Like, she is so fat phobic. It's crazy. And I wonder how much of that comes from being in the cult and is just deeply seated in her, and she can't get rid of it. Because there was kind of like this idea that like women had to be attractive because you're supposed to be using your body to recruit people for Jesus, right? So it is a trip. It is a wild freaking trip. And if you want a trip, I would read that. The next one I will talk about is Heaven by Miyako Kawakami. I did listen to this only on audiobook because I still don't have physical copies of these. I want the copies that are like the UK editions and of this and Breast and Eggs, and one day I will get them off of Book Depository, but I'm just, They're expensive. Every time I have to get something from Book Depository, it gets expensive, but I'll get them one day. But anyway, Heaven is a fantastic novella by Miyako Kawakami, who's one of my favorite authors that I found in 2021, and I'm continuing into 2022, obviously reading them. She has a new book coming out this year sometime as well, so I'm super excited for that. I have that one I have on pre-order, so that I will at least own one Miyako Kawakami book. This is the story of two children in school. It is translated from Japanese, in case you want to know. So this is about two children in school who are being bullied, a girl and a guy, and it is their sort of relationship as kids that are getting bullied and how they are dealing with it. And they have a lot of very interesting exchanges, even between the main character, the guy. He has this exchange with one of the, not the main bully, but one of the other bullies, where they talk about the bullying, and it's such a raw and direct conversation. And it's so beautifully done, and also so hard to read at times, because you want somebody to stick up for these children, and there's nobody to stick up for them. Both of these kids have gone through a lot of traumas, and they're a little bit like socially weird as a result. And as kids tend to do, they can gang up on these two kids. One's got a lazy eye, the other one like basically like doesn't really wash and is kind of dirty, but like that's because like her dad was like dead, and like it, you know, they have their traumas that they're working through, but like it's like nobody's helping them and nobody is protecting them, and it's very upsetting to read. But also very powerful and moving, because this is the kind of stuff that happens in schools. Kids can be quite cruel, and they can really bully each other, and especially now in the day of social media and constantly being plugged in, you can't escape the bullying. There is no going home. Like when I was in school, if I got bullied, or if somebody was mean to me, or if I had an altercation with a student or a classmate, I should say, they weren't my students, with a classmate, I could go home, and unless they wanted to call my house line and get through my parents and, you know, and to harass me that way, I got a break, and maybe I went back the next day and somebody was mean to me, but I got a break. You got a mental break from that stressor. And now you think about all these kids that are having increased mental health issues. They're constantly plugged in, and they're constantly being bombarded with either like FOMO-y kind of messages, or actual negative messages from people that are bullying them, or just lots of images that maybe affect their ability to perceive themselves and love themselves, because they don't see them out there. I think that the internet's getting a little bit better in terms of that one aspect. At least I've seen a lot more people being very proud about being who they are, and having their aesthetic, and having their weirdness, and being proud of it. And I say weirdness in air quotes because it's not weird. You just are who you are. And I feel like I see that like a lot, specifically on TikTok, I feel like, and then it starts to bleed over into Instagram. Like Instagram is losing some of its like picture perfectness, I think. It's still there, but it's losing some of that. But like TikTok's getting this like influx. You see these people that get dressed and they do their outfits of the day, and they are wearing what makes them absolutely happy, and you might classify as like strange or weird or different, but it makes them happy. And imagine being a kid who that is their aesthetic too. That is what makes them happy, and they see that and they're like, I'm not strange and I'm not weird. Even if I feel like I am, I'm not, because there's another person out there who likes the things I like, that is the way I am. So there are positives to the whole social media thing, but in general, that like constantly being plugged in is not helping our psyches. And so you see like these kids being cruel to each other. That is kind of like a natural coming of age, growing up sort of thing that we go through, that is sort of universal. And it's, I don't know, it's just a wonderful book. I think you guys should read it. It is hard at times, but I absolutely loved it. So then I'm going to quickly just go through a stack of books, because I can't really pick. And if you haven't picked up on this yet, if you don't follow me on Instagram and you can't guess what's coming, it's going to be Jinju Ito. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I feel like I've been a broken record. in the last few weeks about this, but I started with Venus in the Blind Spot for January in Japan, and then I just kept going with things. I just picked up Uzumaki last night, which I'm going to have to, I'll probably really get into this coming week, but they're just fantastic. They're beautiful, beautiful mangas. I really love the stories. They really stick in your head. Some of them are obviously better than others, but in general, I really freaking love them. So this was a fantastic, finally biting the bullet and trying this. They're very expensive. So that's the one thing I will tell you if you want to go into Junji Ito and you're not sure about diving into it, get it from your library, because if you fall in love with them, they are expensive and it will take you some time to acquire them all, because I am sucking wind this month because I bought 4 of them, 5 of them last month like a crazy person. So no more books. I need to be good. No more books for a little bit. I need to recoup from January. I went crazy buying books. Then I have 2 more for you. I will do Wahala first. So this is a book I read right in the beginning of the month. This is by Nikki May. It's a debut, and it's like Sex in the City, but make it a thriller with Nigerian women in England. So I absolutely loved this book. So you have 3 women that are adult friends, Ronki, Boo, and Simi. And Simi is the one that has this friend, Isabel, from when they grew up in Nigeria. And Isabel just kind of shows up on the scene and infiltrates this friend group. And Isabel, there's just something off about her. There's something wrong with her, and she's just a little iffy. And you start to, the whole story just starts to unfold as these 3 women are, they're trying to grapple with life things like, do I have a baby when I just want to have a career? Am I really still into my husband? Because I'm feeling stagnant in my life, and I need something more. How, like dating as an adult, and how do I find a good man? All these normal sort of life things, and then you add this thriller layer onto it with Isabella, and like, what is this woman up to? And it was so good. And the food. I need to just make a list of books for you guys that's just like books that will make you hungry. This book made me so hungry, and there's recipes in the back, and I need to try it, but like I don't even know where to get half the ingredients, because like I need to find like a Nigerian market, an African market, like something, so I can find some of these things, because there's some stuff in here that is definitely not at my local Stop and Shop. But it's fantastic. I can hear Hemi running around, and I really hope he's just having the zoomies. He's just having the zoomies. But anyway, so this was really great, and I highly encourage you to read it, and it's beautiful, and it's great, and I can't wait to read more from that author. I think it was phenomenally well done. And last but certainly not least is The Street by Ann Petrie. Now, I read this because Naomi loved it so much, and she's been asking me to read it, and I had it on my list for a while. I think I had it on hold at my library for months for the audiobook, and then when we did our interview on the podcast with A Black Man Reading, he talked about it a lot, because in one of his Books Are Pop Culture podcasts, I think his first episode, if not their first 2 episodes, he and Reggie talk about this book at length. And it is so phenomenal. If you've been reading Passing with us for the Passing Reading Project, I encourage you, if you haven't read it, to read The Street, because it's about the same sort of area. You're in Harlem, but now you're in the 40s, and you're instead of the 20s, and they're kind of different socioeconomic brackets. I asked Naomi on the podcast if she thinks there was also perhaps some sort of shift that happened in Harlem between the 20s and 40s that puts these 2 women groups into different category, like social economic categories. That's what I'm trying to say. But it's a phenomenal book that breaks down the like ecosystem. I don't even know, is that the right word? But just breaks down the world that our main character lives in. And let me get her name correctly here. Ludi. So Ludi Johnson is this single-ish mother who, it starts off with her looking for an apartment, and she's trying to find somewhere that she can live and take care of her son. And her husband sort of has become this non-entity in their lives. And So she's now just got to raise her son by herself, and she's got to be able to budget and do all these things, get a job and take care of her son. And it's incredibly difficult. You watch her struggle and you listen to her struggle, and you get an idea of what of Harlem, especially on this street, Harlem in this moment in time. And it's so interesting because her writing is so vivid and lifelike. You really like feel like you're walking on the street. I have actual notes for this one. Feel like you're walking on the street. There's so much like blatant and very casual racism, which I'm not saying that these things don't happen today, but I'm saying they don't happen exactly like they happen in this book. So there are these moments where you're like, as a modern reader, it makes you kind of whiplash because people don't casually speak like that. In my world, at least, people do say still very horrible things and do very horrible things, but I just feel like maybe it's more insidious today instead of being so just accepted and forward facing. I don't know, but that was definitely something that was an interesting thing to notice. The men in this book are all terrible. Like, they're all terrible. I don't think there's a man in this book who isn't terrible. Like, they're lecherous. That not landlord, the super is just misogynistic and brutal. There's so much domestic violence that occurs in this book. It's ridiculous. One thing I have written here is, how do you expect people to survive if you give people zero opportunities or access to adequate and basic resources like food, good food, and medical care? And that is definitely something that gets addressed throughout this book, and is something that we're still addressing, if we're even addressing it at all, but we should be addressing it because of this idea of like no healthcare for everybody and food deserts, and like the amount that has changed and also has stayed exactly the same since this book being written in the 40s is just so depressing to realize. Just like the amount of daily, and the last thing I have written here is the daily stressors these characters have to juggle is heartbreaking. Times haven't changed much. No human should have to walk through their life with these kinds of thoughts going on constantly, and these kinds of stressors and aggressors just floating around them and having to navigate all that. Like, there's nothing good that comes out of this. The health outcomes are going to be poor. The mental health outcomes are going to be poor. Like, we need to better our communities. And like I said, it's like so much hasn't changed that it's depressing. So this was phenomenal. I need to read more from Ann Petrie. She has a few other things that I need to find, including the Narrows, but this was phenomenal. And I'm almost sad we didn't make it a TBR lowdown pick so that we could talk about it more broadly with all of y'all. But if you've never read The Street, I encourage you to pick it up. So those were my 6 notable, I guess 8, if you count all the Junji Ito's, notable reads from January. And I would love to know what some of your favorite reads were from the past month. Was there anything you DNF'd recently, and like why? This is the last video I'm filming today, so I'm a little bit like, just get to the end, Alyssa. You got stuff to do with your life. But anyway, so if you guys feel so inclined, please like and subscribe. I appreciate everybody who is here in my tiny little community of readers. If you're new, say hi and I'll say hello to you. And I have to catch up on a couple comments that have come through on some older videos. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me. Trying to find another way to say this, but I think we were meant to be.